This is Sky World News with Hannah Tallett.
Hello, welcome to World News. The two men vying to be America's next vice president have gone head-to-head on US television. The incumbent VP Joe Biden and his Republican challenger Paul Ryan squared up to each other during a 90-minute debate in Kentucky. Mr. Biden attempted to make up the ground lost by his boss, Barack Obama, whose performance against Mitt Romney last week was widely seen as disappointing. The debate was dominated by healthcare, the economy, and the threat from Iran.
A nuclear-armed Iran, which triggers a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. This is the world's largest sponsor of terrorism. They've dedicated themselves to wiping an entire country off the map. They call us the Great Satan. And if they get nuclear weapons, other people in the neighborhood will pursue their nuclear weapons as well.
Vice President Biden.
We can't live with that.
War should always be the absolute last resort. That's why these crippling sanctions with Bibi Netanyahu says we should continue, which, if I'm not mistaken, Governor Romney says we should continue. If I may be mistaken, he changed his mind so often, I could be wrong. But the fact of the matter is, he says they're working. And the fact is that they are being crippled by them. And we've made it clear, big nations can't bluff. This president doesn't bluff.
Well, the two contenders also clashed over health care.
Choose your plan, and then Medicare subsidizes your premiums. Not as much for the wealthy people, more coverage for middle-income people, and total out-of-pocket coverage for the poor and the sick. Choice and competition. We would rather have 50 million future seniors determine how their Medicare is delivered to them instead of 15 bureaucrats deciding what, if, where, when they get it.
Vice President Biden, too.
You know, I heard that death panel argument from Sarah Palin. It seems every vice presidential debate I hear this kind of stuff about panels. But let's talk about Medicare. What we did is we saved $716 billion and put it back, applied it to Medicare. We cut the cost of Medicare. We stopped overpaying insurance companies, when doctors and hospitals. The AMA supported what we did. AARP endorsed what we did. And it extended the life of Medicare to 2024.
And the exchange regarding the tax plans of both parties was, unsurprisingly, quite lively.
We can't afford $800 billion going to people making a minimum of $1 million. They do not need it, Martha. Those 120,000 families make $8 million a year. Middle-class people need the help. Why does my friend cut out the tuition tax credit for them? Why does he go after the child care?
Can you declare anything off limits?
Why do they do
Can you declare anything off limits?
Yeah, we're saying close loopholes on high-interest people.
Home mortgage deduction.
For higher-income people. Here.
Can you guarantee that no one making less than $100,000 have a mortgage deduction impacted?
This taxes a million small businesses. He keeps trying to make you think that it's just some movie star or hedge fund guy or
97% of the small businesses make less than $250,000 a year, would not be affected.
You know, it hits a million people. This taxes a million people, a million small businesses.
Does it tax 97% of the American businesses?
It taxes a million small businesses who are our greatest job creators.
I wish I could get it.
Well, with me now is Dr. James Boyce, an American foreign policy expert, at King's College London. I'll get there in the end.
Absolutely.
So, who won?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see which way the polls go. They're going to be coming in the next couple of hours, I guess. I think that what you saw was both men playing to their strengths. So, with luck, hopefully, there'll be a tie. I think you'll see Joe Biden very much, perhaps, seem to be stronger on foreign affairs. Paul Ryan playing, as you would expect, to his strengths on domestic policy. What it's going to be fascinating to see is how women break down on this, because your clips didn't reveal it, but right towards the end, Ryan appeared to put Roe versus Wade into play, and in a year when Republicans have been accused of having a war on women, it's going to be very interesting to see whether that gets picked up upon. He mentioned the idea that he doesn't want unelected judges deciding what happens with abortion law. That's an alarm bell to an awful lot of people within the United States who worry that Roe versus Wade could be overturned if a Republican president retakes the White House.
Yeah, it's interesting because Obama's always been personally quite popular with female voters, but Biden not so much.
Well, no, I think there's a degree of what you say there which is true, but I think what you're seeing is I think that the Republicans very much are struggling to know how to play the female card this year, and there's no doubt that the Democrats are managing to exploit that very well. Biden really didn't have a chance to come back at him with that, but certainly it was something that leapt off the screen when Ryan suddenly started talking about the idea of judges not deciding who it is that should decide abortion law in America, and that's going to be something that I think Obama could try and latch onto in the last 2 weeks of this campaign.
And this vice presidential debate was perhaps more fiery than others have been in previous years. But how significant or what impact, if any, does a vice presidential debate have on the final outcome of an election?
Well, a vice president is there very much to take the low road and allow their bosses to try and take the high road. And I think you saw that tonight. It was quite scrappy, quite boisterous in places. There was a lot of bickering going on. I don't think an awful lot of people will have tuned into this expecting to hear much great policy debate. It's all about personality. And what tonight will probably do is reinforce pre-existing ideas about the two separate tickets.
James, mixed reviews on Twitter and social networking sites as to who won. What was your impression?
I think what you saw was a very high-energy, contentious debate between two individuals who really wanted to, raise the energy levels following last week's rather disappointing debate, certainly from Obama's point of view. I think if you look at the initial polling that comes out, I think that Paul Ryan's decision to really sort of focus his closing remarks down the camera lens and ask American people for their vote, which is something that the Vice President singularly failed to do, seems to be paying dividends because it looks as though he's coming out ahead in certainly the early polling which we're seeing coming out of the United States tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden trying to look like the veteran debater and draw on his own personal experience of being in this situation before. But it seemed to me that very much that Paul Ryan came across as being quite rehearsed, whereas Biden seemed quite bemused. Yeah,
I think what you saw was two very different generations of political debate. Joe Biden has been around the block an awful lot. He obviously was involved in the presidential debates last time round with Sarah Palin. Paul Ryan, different generation, more of a professional politician potentially, as you say, more rehearsed. Some of his answers, therefore, are a little bit more robotic. Certainly with Joe Biden, you never know quite what you're going to get whenever he opens his mouth, and that was certainly remarked upon. So certainly two very different styles of debating, and I think you're going to see that emerging in the polls coming out in the next 24 hours.
Let's dive a bit more now into the policy, what they actually talked about, domestic, foreign policy. They also, after the initial Syria and Iran talk, they talk more about their personal politics, about religion, about the anti-abortion, pro-life debate. That was quite interesting, really, given that that's a massive dividing point in America.
It is, and what's fascinating is that you've got two Catholics vying to be vice president for the first time. Both of them were asked about abortion, and initially both sort of handled the question as you'd expect. And then I think perhaps that Paul Ryan revealed his inexperience at this level, because instead of just basically saying an answer and then keeping quiet and moving on, he then continued his answer to talk about the idea that he wasn't happy with unelected judges making the decision about who decides abortion law. That's a real red flag to an awful lot of people, especially women in the United States, who might worry about the potential continuation of Roe versus Wade under a potential Romney administration. Roe versus Wade, of course, which allows for safe and legal abortion for women in the United States.
OK, very interesting. Dr. James Boys, many thanks for your thoughts.